the World Championship in professional wrestling. It is the top honor that one could achieve in whatever respective companies that they're in. Today, there are several championships that can be considered world championships, whether it's WWE, NWA, AWA, or even Impact. They all have world championships, each of them with their own lineage, their own history, some of them even dating back as far as 70 years or more. Yet the history of the World Heavyweight Championship dates back over 100 years. I am Dwayne Rothman, and I want to thank you all for joining me for a special look at the history of the World Championship in professional wrestling. The first World Heavyweight Championship in professional wrestling, the original World Heavyweight Championship in professional wrestling, dates back to 1905, when the European Greco-Roman heavyweight champion George Hackenschmidt defeated American heavyweight champion Tom Jenkins in New York City on May 4th of 1905. The history of that championship would continue to grow with succeeding champions such as Frank Gotch, Joe Stetcher, and Ed Strangler Lewis. Stanislaus Zbyszko defeated Wayne Munn on April 15th of 1925. However, promoters in Michigan and Illinois refused to recognize Zbyszko and continued to promote Munn instead. This dispute wouldn't end until 1928, when Ed Lewis, the Michigan-Illinois version of the world champion, defeated Joe Stetcher, who was widely recognized as the world champion, on February 21st of 1928. However, and this is by my best research, it is around this time where multiple different versions of the World Heavyweight Championship began to emerge, such as the AWA World Heavyweight Championship, the Boston version, from 1928 to 1952, which is not to be confused with the AWA World Heavyweight Championship from 1960 to 1990, which I'll talk about again here in a little bit. The Boston version also had splinter versions of itself, such as the AWA World Heavyweight Championship Chicago version from 1950 to 1952, and also the AWA World Heavyweight Championship Ohio version from 1950 to 1954. And others would include the New York State Athletic Commission World Heavyweight Championship from 1929 to 1938, the World Heavyweight Championship Pacific Northwest version from 1930 to 1952, the National Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship from 1930 to 1949, and the MWA, the Midwest Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship from 1940 to 1948. And I'm sure that the list goes on and on and on, because there were probably several others around that time frame that I have no idea about and may have never even been documented. In 1948, a group of promoters from all over the United States would band together to form the National Wrestling Alliance, or the NWA. One of the promotions that would join the NWA was the MWA, or the Midwest Wrestling Association, like I had mentioned previously. Now, the MWA World Heavyweight Champion at the time was Orville Brown, and he was then recognized as the first NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Now, Lou Thesz would then be awarded the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in November of 1949, when Brown had to retire after suffering career-ending injuries in a car accident. Now, the original World Heavyweight Championship that I talked about in the beginning seems to no longer exist by this point, after being vacated by Jim Lundis when he retired on January 28th of 1946. The original World Heavyweight Championship lineage would pick back up again in 1952 when Lou Thesz would combine the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Championship, the National Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship, and the Los Angeles Olympic Auditorium World Heavyweight Championship, also known as the Pacific Northwest version of the World Heavyweight Championship. And it was then that the original World Heavyweight Championship and the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, World Heavyweight Championship would begin to intertwine and began to share the lineage, allowing the lineage of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship to be traced all the way back to 1905, making it the oldest surviving wrestling championship in the world to date. Now, by the late 1950s, things began to change, and perhaps one of, if not the most pivotal dates in the history of world championships happened on June 14th of 1957. Edouard Carpentier defeated the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Lou Thesz by disqualification when Thesz could not continue due to a back injury. However, the NWA rules state that the title cannot change hands due to a disqualification, so Carpentier had to give the title back to Lou Thesz. However, many of the promoters were not satisfied with this decision and still recognized the title change. Several World Heavyweight Championships splintered off of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship because of this, such as the World Heavyweight Championship Omaha version from 1957 to 1963, the WWA, or Worldwide Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship from 1957 to 1968, and the AAC, or the Atlantic Athletic Commission World Heavyweight Championship from 1957 to 1975. And all three of those would then recognize Edouard Carpentier as their first World Heavyweight Champions. The reason that this is so significant is because before this match, it was the last time that the original World Heavyweight Championship was unified, and to this date, it has been never fully unified ever again. The original World Heavyweight Championship and the NWA World Heavyweight Championship would continue to share their lineage for about another month and a half, until July 24th of 1957, where Lou Thesz would defeat Edouard Carpentier in a rematch. And following that match, the lineage of the original World Heavyweight Championship would continue on through with the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The World Heavyweight Championship would continue to be split even further, because by 1960, Verne Gagne lobbied for a match for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against reigning champion Pat O'Connor. He didn't get it, and due to his frustrations about the politics involving these types of decisions, Verne Gagne, along with a few other territories, left the NWA to form the AWA, the American Wrestling Association. And in the process, the AWA recognized Pat O'Connor as the first AWA World Heavyweight Champion and gave him 90 days to defend the title against Verne Gagne. The NWA ignored all of this, and Pat O'Connor was stripped of the AWA World Heavyweight Championship and simply awarded to Verne Gagne. The Omaha version of the World Heavyweight Championship that I had mentioned before, that had split off from the NWA in 1957, would unify with the AWA World Heavyweight Championship on September 7th of 1963. Now, perhaps the most important split away from the NWA World Heavyweight Championship would take place in 1963, when Lou Thesz would defeat Buddy Rogers in a one-fall match on January 24th of that year. Northeast promoters Vince McMahon Sr. and Toots Mondt did not recognize this title change because in the NWA World Championship was traditionally contested under the best of three stipulation, or a 2 out of 3 falls. McMahon and Mont would go on to form the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and began recognizing Buddy Rogers as the first WWF World Heavyweight Champion right away. So now, we have multiple World Heavyweight Champions. 3 major ones anyway. The AWA World Heavyweight Championship, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. The AWA World Heavyweight Championship would continue to be the top prize of the AWA from the date it was established on May 18th of 1960 until it was deactivated on January 12th of 1991 when the AWA closed its doors, a time frame lasting over 30 years. The NWA World Heavyweight Championship would continue to be defended year after year in multiple different territories. But by 1985, Jim Crockett Promotions controlled many of the NWA territories and therefore control of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Jim Crockett Promotions attempted to go national, but nearly went out of business. And by 1988, Jim Crockett Promotions was sold to Ted Turner. Now, Ted began to slowly rename the company World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. And by January of 1991, WCW began to recognize current NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair as the WCW World Heavyweight Champion as well. But about 6 months later, Flair would leave and sign with the WWF. He was stripped of both World Heavyweight Championships. And both the NWA and WCW would go on to crown their own separate champions while maintaining a working relationship. It didn't last long, however, as by 1993, WCW withdrew from the NWA completely. Yet they maintained the possession of the physical Big Gold NWA Championship belt, which was then renamed the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship, which would be a separate World Championship to the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. By June of 1994, Ric Flair would defeat Sting to unify the 2 world titles as one single WCW World Heavyweight Championship and was represented once again by the old NWA Big Gold belt. The WCW World Heavyweight Championship would go on to be the top prize for WCW, becoming arguably the most important world championship for a few years during its history, spanning a little over 10 years. It would have a short lifespan in the WWF, but who really counts that? After losing their major partner, WCW, in 1993, the NWA found some new partners. And after nearly a year with no NWA World Heavyweight Champion, they were ready to crown a new champion. Shane Douglas would defeat Too Cold Scorpio in a tournament final. He would immediately throw the belt down and declare himself the ECW World Heavyweight Champion. ECW withdraws from the NWA, and the ECW World Heavyweight Championship was born, while the NWA is without a champion once more. The ECW World Heavyweight Championship would remain active from 1994 until 2001, once ECW closed down. And we're not even going to talk about the sad WWE version of the supposed ECW World title. After the blow the NWA took from ECW, they would hold another championship tournament 3 months later. And they somehow managed to keep the NWA World Heavyweight Championship alive, circulating it amongst small independent promotions from late 1994 until mid-2002. And in 2002, NWA Total Nonstop Action was formed by Jeff and Jerry Jarrett, and the NWA World Heavyweight Championship was revitalized once more. TNA would feature NWA championships for several years as part of the agreement with the NWA. However, in May of 2007, that agreement came to an end. And once again, the NWA was left out in the cold. TNA would create the TNA World Heavyweight Championship to be featured as their top prize, and it would remain so for the next 10 years. But by 2017, TNA was in turmoil, and the World Heavyweight Championship would be caught in the chaos. Along with the company, it would be renamed 5 separate times in less than a year before finally settling on and becoming known as the Impact World Championship. The Impact World Championship is continuing its near 13-year history to this day. Another world championship that is now being promoted is the All Elite Wrestling or AEW World Heavyweight Championship. AEW was founded in January of 2019 after Cody Rhodes, along with several others, left Ring of Honor to create the company. Its first champion was crowned in August of 2019, which means, at the time of this recording, the AEW World Championship is less than a year old. And now to talk about the WWE. Now, as I've mentioned, the WWE Championship dates all the way back to Buddy Rogers in 1963. And with the exception of the WCW Championship that was on the scene in 2001, the WWE Championship was the only world championship promoted by the WWE from 1963 until 2002. And in 2002, the company had gotten so large that they held a brand split. And they introduced a top championship specifically for the Raw brand, titled the World Heavyweight Championship. The World Heavyweight Championship lasted for over 11 years, yet the WWE has sometimes loosely linked its lineage back to the WCW and the NWA World Heavyweight Championships. The World Heavyweight Championship was unified with the WWE Championship on December 15th of 2013. By 2016, the WWE was once again too big, and once again they did another brand split. However, they would not bring back the World Heavyweight Championship. Instead, they opted to create a new one, which would simply be known as the WWE Universal Championship. Being a brand new championship, it does not share lineage or history with any other previous World Championship. And at the time of this recording, the WWE Universal Championship is still being used to this day. In addition, WWE created yet another brand for developing new talent, and thus the NXT Championship was born and established on July 1st of 2012. As NXT grew, so did the need for NXT to become more than just a developmental brand. And by mid-2017, WWE began to officially recognize the NXT Championship as their third World Championship. At the time of this recording, the NXT Championship is still being used to this day. Oh, and that third World Championship, WWE's original World Heavyweight Championship, is still being used to this day, even though its lineage dates back well over 50 years. It's strangely considered by WWE as an equal to the Universal and NXT Championships, which I personally don't agree with. So from one single World Heavyweight Championship, we now have one from Impact, we have one from AEW, and we have 3 from the WWE. But we can't forget about the last one. That's right, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Since May of 2007, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship floated around the independents for another 11 years before finding the spotlight once again when Cody Rhodes challenged Nick Aldis at All In on September 1st of 2018. Since that time, Nick Aldis has reclaimed the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and the NWA, for the first time in its 70-plus year history, is no longer a group of individual promoters, but one singular owner. And after the All-In match, the NWA has seemed to find itself as its own small promotion with its NWA Power Series on YouTube. At the time of this recording, the over 70-year-old NWA World Heavyweight Championship, with the lineage dating back over 115 years, is still active today and looking stronger than it has in over a decade. So, out of the one World Heavyweight Championship in 1905 comes 6 different World Heavyweight Championships 115 years later, with many that have come and gone within that time frame. And the craziest part about all of this is that this is just the American history. This doesn't even take into account today's Japanese World Championships, such as the AJPW Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship, which began in 1989, or the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, which began in 1987, or today's Mexican World Championships, such as the CMLL World Heavyweight Championship that started in 1991, or the AAA Mega Championship that started in 2007. All of which with their own history and lineage as well. So I have some questions for you all to wrap this whole thing up. What do you think is the true World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship today? Do you think there is a true World Heavyweight Championship in wrestling today? Or do you think that there hasn't been a true World Heavyweight Championship since the big split in 1957? Personally, I think if there has to be one true World Heavyweight Championship, the only one that can make claim to that is the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Yes, I know, it's had a hard road, but it clearly links itself to the original World Heavyweight Championship from 1905, and it's been around for over 70 years. So with that length of time, things are bound to have rough patches in their history. In addition to the several separate World Heavyweight Championships that have split off from it over the years, including the WWA, the AAC, AWA, WCW, ECW, TNA, and even WWE, and yet it has still survived and outlasted most of the ones that I have just mentioned. So as far as my opinion goes, the one and only true World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship is the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. With that being said, let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you for all joining me for this special in-depth look at the history of wrestling's World Championships.